Hi everybody, just a quick note. If you're a listener to the Nerds Domain podcast, you'll need to go back into iTunes or your other podcatching device and resubscribe after May 8th. We'll be switching podcasting hosts, and our new host will require us to resubmit our RSS feed, which messes up some things in iTunes. We'll still be putting out podcasts, everything's going great, but I just want to make sure that all of our listeners are getting our new content from our new RSS feed. Thank you very much. You'll hear us real soon.
You better button your brain, you're in the Nerds Domain. Come on in, it's about to begin.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the Nerds Domain podcast. I'm Matt, and I'm here with Shirley.
Hello.
John.
Hi.
And Phil.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about some nerdy stuff. I think we normally we do a podcast called What You Doing, but this one we're going to call I Know What You're Doing. And we're going to make it about Cthulhu and horror a little bit, and bringing horror into some storytelling for role-playing and that kind of stuff. So,
where are we at?
We are at, thank you, good call. We are currently in India, according to the map on the table. But we are at the International Steampunk Symposium in Cincinnati. And I'm going to mute my phone because that's what we should be doing already. So, I don't know, John, you had a decent idea of what you want to talk about, so do you want to start?
Oh, sure. I was going to talk about my favorite Lovecraft story, the Pickman's Model.
Tell me about Pickman's Model.
Yeah, Pickman's Model, sorry. I don't have the notes.
No, that's okay.
I wasn't prepared. So Pickman's Model is a great story that explores horror from the tell it, not show it aspects. Without spoiling too much, the main character has a friend who is a painter, and they get together several times a month usually, and then all of a sudden one day Pickman just vanishes and leaves no trace whatsoever. Nobody knows what happened to him. And so the main character sets out to find his friend. The story leads him all over the city and eventually down into a condemned building or dilapidated building, then down further into the basement, then down further into the sewers. And just the whole time the dread just grows and grows and grows. And then the main character finds out that the artist had been painting a picture that no one knew about, and at first he finds these studies, and he describes how grotesque they are without actually showing the monster, and then he sees a first painting, and then he finally finds the painting, and he just talks about everything around the monster in the painting, how horrifying that is, and then he gets to the monster itself and can't even describe it because of how disgusting and horrible it is. Then the monster comes into the room because it's further down in the sewers, and the reveal in that was just masterfully done. And out of the entire book of Lovecraft's Cthulhu-related materials, that's the one that sticks with me. It might have something to do with the fact that I am an artist as well, and that just spoke to me in a lot of ways. But it's something people joke about with Lovecraft is he describes things as undescribable, and it's kind of silly to say that, because if you can see it, you can describe it. But in Pickman's Model, he illustrates what that means, and that he never tells you or shows you the actual monster in the story until the very end, but you're still scared by the ambiance around the void. Okay. So it's a great story.
So what do you take from that to do horror storytelling? The whole describe the ambiance around the horror without actually showing the monster. Okay. Is a thing I've tried to invoke a few times. Whether I was successful or not, I won't be
stuck up enough to claim whether I was successful or not. But it's, to me, that's some of the best scary stories, is when you don't see the monster coming after you. You just know it's there.
Yeah.
And eventually, you can't get away from it.
And your side quest that we
Yes.
played through, there were a couple of instances where we didn't explore enough, and I'm not sure, you would have given us more detail.
Oh, sure,
we would have
yeah.
seen things, but we never got there, so I always knew we knew there was something out there, and that made it more urgent.
Oh yeah, you were 6 guys who sat down and knew you were going to play a Call of Cthulhu game.
Yeah.
So when I was like, oh, here's a thing that's kind of weird, here's a thing that's kind of creepy, everybody goes, yeah, I see those things. I'm going the other way.
Yeah, that didn't work out well. So Phil, you're an avid reader of horror.
You could probably say that.
You've read a couple of things, so I don't know. Is there anything that I know you haven't done a lot of storytelling without modules for
Right.
Cthulhu, but is there anything you draw on when you do that? Anything from your reading or any other aspects?
Well, certainly, when I try to do that, I try to make sure that the players have the information that they need, but I don't try to force them down any paths and let the uncertainty in their own not knowing what's going on build and grow, and not try to frustrate them, but certainly not give them anything that they don't explicitly ask for or need, so that uncertainty and can certainly work on themselves.
And for our listeners at home, just to give them a heads up, because we kind of jumped right into this. Phil, you're not normally on the podcast, but you will be joining our Achtung Cthulhu officially sometime in August, I think, is when this will start going up. And you've been on a couple of side quests for the Masks of Nyarlathotep stuff.
Yes, I've done some side quests, and I'm looking forward to doing more.
You did Shirley's, where we were children, and she corrupted us, and it was terrible. Really fun game.
My character joined the cult and got to keep
That's why I
going.
said corrupted us. Yeah. And then you were
Here's one of
in
the smart ones.
Jesse's newest one that we haven't released yet.
Yes.
Where we were in Japan and something about zombies.
Yeah, something like that.
So,
not going to give anything away there.
So, is there any authors that you look to for horror that you enjoy specifically?
I've read more of kind of the Stephen King type era, not a lot of Lovecraft, and so the aspects that might overlap with kind of Lovecraft there is kind of the idea of the certainly in some of King's books is kind of the idea of the big bad evil that would destroy everything versus a small element of good fighting against it. And so trying to make the players, and certainly when I'm a player, I feel as if I'm that element of good fighting against a large evil against great odds. And so as a storyteller, I certainly try to set that tone that there's not just this evil that might impact them, but would have a larger scope and reach.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Shirley, you know I was coming to you, right?
Yes.
What do you have for us?
I think really I've never read any Lovecraft, which I feel kind of bad about, but what I've seen is Dagon, which it's very a B-rated movie, but it drew me in, and it very much follows my storytelling style, as in with the kids and the Halloween party. It's the people, and they're going to betray you.
Okay.
So I kind of have that betrayal type of storytelling aspect, where you're safe, you feel safe, you're in an atmosphere that is safe, and then by the end you realize that everything that you thought was safety isn't, and you get pulled into either you're going to survive or you're going to not be there anymore. And I attribute a lot of that to, I read a lot of John Saul in my junior high and high school days, and I really love his imagery and the way that he tells his horror stories, because he starts out just with normal people, and then there's this mystery, and it ends up that it's something in the environment that's around you that you you've known the whole time, and then by the end you find out that it's not safe.
Okay. And you have definitely used that. That's the call. The one shot you ran us through very much was weird because we knew something was odd going to a weird house, but it went bad.
Well, I just felt like I don't know why I chose children and Halloween's my favorite time of year, but I don't know why I chose like the children theme and the Halloween party. It just felt like something that I could build upon as I went through the story.
Well, did a very good job of that, building on it.
Well, I will say playing as a child certainly put a unique spin on it as a player, because certainly as an adult you feel a certain higher level of freedom because you don't have someone that's supposed to be telling you what to do and those types of things, and so certainly there's that level of trust that a child has with their parents or their friends' parents that played into it, and then also kind of that aspect of even more so than that small power of good against the overwhelming power of evil. As a child, it's even more seemingly stacked against you. Because
And what I found interesting is that's one of the first, except for the D&D game that I ran at your house, I think that was the second game that I've ever run as a DM, and you were the most difficult in the whole thing. You're the first person that I ran up against that actually tried to like circumvent the storyline and put kind of niches in it, which I found was very helpful to me because it made me step up my game and be able to come back at you with the different avenues that we could take so that I could take you guys down.
I hope you felt that was playing the character and not just being a
no, I very much felt like you embodied your character.
Don't worry, Scott and I were just being pains.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Johnny? Oh, okay.
Not really, no.
So I'm going to cheat because, haha. And I'm going to hit a steampunk and horror all at once to fit with the theme of where we're at. There's a board game that I backed on Kickstarter about a year ago called Machina Arcana, which is essentially steampunk heroes investigating the Mountains of Madness. Which, if you're familiar with Mountains of Madness story, it is a H.P. Lovecraft. There's something in the mountains, and they go there, and everything is steampunk. So all your weapons are steampunk, and your gear, and there's magic, and it's the art is phenomenal. The monsters are just a little different and off, partially for, I'm sure, copyright reasons, but also to make them a little more unique. And I really enjoy that.
How does the game actually play?
It's Hero Quest.
Hero's Quest.
I mean, there's more to it than that, but it's your basic...
Sure, but, you have a dungeon, a map, and you clear it.
And also, the stories are unique. Like, it has, here's your story, read this as it happens, and the monsters run themselves, the game runs itself, so you don't have that guy behind the screen.
Who knows what's going on.
Yeah, and the stories are intricate. Each card you pull gives you a little bit more story, so when the environment affects you, it has a reason and it explains it to you, and it makes it creepy. So there's... I think a lot of what I learned from that leads into what you were saying, is setting the ambiance, giving the setting the dread and the horror while not letting it become too overwhelming. It's still, like, the scary house isn't scary if it's not dark or if it's not creaky or, all those things. So that's the big parts I've picked up out of that. I don't know. Anybody else can go now, but is there any other...
Well, I felt, when we were playing Machina Arcana, I felt... different than I've felt in any other type of Cthulhu game like that or any type of dungeon game like that, because there was this one monster that I felt like my character could die, and usually I don't feel that way in board games, and it was difficult to beat that guy, and I was just like, okay, this game has kind of stepped up and made it so it's, you have to think about the steps that you're going to take or the tools that you're going to pick up or weapons that you're going to pick up, and it makes it a little harder to defeat the game.
Okay. So are there any other influences you guys use? I know we were talking about the things that we do. Is there anything else you go to when it comes to horror and those aspects, or anything along those lines? I know I could talk a ton about the other influences I use, but I wanted to make sure that I don't just sit here and talk for a half hour.
Well,
okay.
That's what you're good at.
Love you.
The next one I would say is Lock and Key by Joe Hill. It's a comic book series. It's very much Lovecraftian. It's set in a town called Lovecraft. There's a lot going on. There's some body horror. There's a part where they find a key that lets you open your head. And when other people look down into your head, they can see your memories and your thoughts. Like, you can pull out your fear, and so now you no longer have fear. But while they're looking in, you're looking in with them. Like, if you open my head and Phil, you were looking in my head, I would be standing next to you, looking in my head. So there's this.
Well, now you sufficiently frightened me about thinking about looking into your head.
Yeah. So there's those kinds of things. There's a lot in that, and it's a very intricate story. It's very deep. It's a comic book series, but it's not like a lot of other series where it's, this is issue 1, this is issue 2. It's, here's the first collection of the story, here's the next collection. Those are both 6 issues each, and then they went through, I think, 6 collections, and then an Alpha and Omega, and then that was the end of it. So it was written by Joe Hill, who's the son of Stephen King. He's written quite a bit. Horns, I didn't realize Horns was written by him.
Yeah.
There's a movie called a book called Nosferatu, written by him. It sounds interesting. So he's prolific with what he does. He does not just books, but comics and novellas and a little bit of everything. So I don't know.
I would say that the thriller end of the horror spectrum might also be an influence. Less kind of the gore or gratuitous other aspects, that kind of end of horror, not so much for a Call of Cthulhu type aspect, but more of the horror that really focuses on building the tension and setting an atmosphere and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we have that kind of visual presentation very often, but just kind of thinking about the things that they're doing to build that tension.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I like most about. I mean, even when I watched Dagon, you knew something was going on, and the people in the village, were being kind of, I don't know, like, not shady, but they were very much avoiding, because they didn't want to tell everybody about the great old one that was living, where they were. And everything was great up until, like, the very end. And, it's old enough. Right?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Where, literally this girl is hanging there and she gets pulled down, but you never see anything.
Yeah, you never see Dagon.
Yeah, you never see it. And up until that point, I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy scary. And then the way that it ended, I was like, oh, well, that felt very anticlimactic to me. It was like, oh, okay, so she gets taken down there, and it felt like there wasn't a very good resolution to the end of the movie.
That's a problem with horror, in my opinion. Certain stories just fall flat because they don't have a satisfying ending, and it's really just it's hard to do. In some films I've watched, I've been on the edge of my seat for the first 45 minutes, and then they're like, okay, here's the climax. And I'm like, that's, or even the movie where they don't have a climax, it just ends. And I'm like, well, that's unsatisfying. Mm-hmm. So it's a delicate balance in telling a good horror story that you deliver that final oomph and you really nail it home. It's difficult.
And I think that's another thing that pushed me to try to make a better story for the characters and the players at the games that I storytell.
Okay. Yeah, this one's a little last minute. No, we'll keep going. We got kind of caught off guard. I misunderstood what we were doing today, and I'm supposed to be in charge, so that means everybody misunderstood what we were doing today. Are there any stories, horror stories or non-horror stories that have horror aspects that stick out in your mind as a thing that you go back and touch?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with the movie Paranormal Activity 2.
Yeah, because you can't now sit with your back to the kitchen.
Yeah, that's why we rearranged the entire downstairs. in Paranormal, I never saw Paranormal Activity 1. It's not been on Netflix since we've had it as a streaming movie. But Paranormal Activity 2, the story is a demon has possessed a woman and wants the baby that she's about to have. And they go through the process to expel the demon. But the guy that does the exorcism doesn't read the fine print, and the demon only goes to the next closest living relative. And the woman who is originally possessed has a sister that lives a couple blocks over. And so the demon goes over there. And actually, that's where the story of Paranormal Activity 1 picks up, is the sister gets possessed. Then she comes back at the end of Paranormal Activity 2, and everybody. And
could you describe that a little more for our listeners at home?
Well, if you want the final scene spoiled, the father, the main male character in the story, thinks that everything is good. He has saved his family, and he can sit back and relax. But then his demon-possessed sister-in-law comes into the house, sneaks into the house because she has a key, and he's sitting there dozing on the couch watching whatever is on TV. And of course, they do this in a found footage way that's very effective. One moment she's there, one moment she's there, one moment she's not. Blah blah blah, and she just kind of goes up to behind the couch where his head is, and she just snaps his neck. And
Shirley, your sister's not allowed to have a key.
And so what really bugged me about that is at the time our living room was set up in a very similar fashion, where the couch had its back to the larger area of our open concept living area. So suddenly it became very creepy for me to sit with my back to the garage and the kitchen when I was the only one awake or even alone in the house. And then my other option was to sit with my back to the windows, which Scott from our other podcast, our Call of Cthulhu game, pointed out very soon after this that I was just right there. Like, the Jason or Freddy could just sneak up to the window and come crashing through, and I probably would have no time to react either. And so I was like, great, can't sit in my living room.
Yeah.
So
I think it's funny the way that horror stories and movies that we watch influence the way that we go about, like this changed your whole life. You can't sit in front of a window and
I wouldn't say it changed my whole life,
your
but
back
it did.
to the thing. But
yes.
Yeah, there's things that, on a daily, maybe not on a daily basis, that I'm just like, okay, that's a taboo for me now because creepy Freddy can come through my bed or
it's a great element
something.
if you can get it when you tell a story that that has parallels to the readers or the audience's life. It's just really hard to do in a writing standpoint because you don't know who's going to be reading. Yeah. But when you sit down at a gaming table or you write a story for your friends, like you can pull in elements that they find creepy, like guys with white face and big red wigs and things like that.
Yeah, clowns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad you called me out on that. Were you going to say something, Phil, before we get into my clowns? Okay. So I am terrified of clowns. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've told this on the official podcast.
What's the phobia called?
Clownophobia. I don't remember.
Clownophobia.
Go and look that up.
Well, actually, Stuff You Should Know just did an episode about this topic. So give me a few minutes. I'll bring up their list.
So I'm terrified of clowns. So a couple of years ago,
you always go off the rails anytime anyone mentions clowns.
Hey, you know what?
I'm surprised you're still sitting here now.
I'm trying to own up to it right now. There are no clowns in the room. There's an octopus who will clearly defend me with his teacups, which will sound really weird to the listeners at home. But this room is pretty awesomely set up. If you want to see pictures of it, follow us on Twitter at NerdsDomain. So you plugged it.
Yep.
But a couple of years ago, I tried to watch it. To force myself out of this terror, and we got to the point where the clown comes up out of the floor in the shower, and I lost it. I could not.
So we have an audience member. I think he looked it up. What is it called?
Colorophobia.
I'm sorry?
Colorophobia.
Colorophobia?
It's because of the wig. You're
Well,
afraid of all those colors.
Yeah.
It actually what's the board?
Wow.
The medical board that writes the book on all that stuff doesn't actually identify that as phobia of clowns. They identify that as phobia of anyone in a costume.
So,
So-
I'm not afraid of those.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
But I was just saying
But yeah.
that's wider than just clowns.
I'd be
That's
screwed here.
right.
The
Yeah,
definition I'm
the-
seeing is fear of clowns.
No.
Well, again, this is the the medical board and their official rating. They describe it as fear of people in exaggerated costumes.
Oh,
So steampunk Santa out there probably bothers
yeah.
somebody who suffers
Yeah,
from the advanced forms.
we were at Indiana Comic-Con.
Thank you.
And thank
No
you very
problem.
much. And we had to. You and I were walking through, and we had to
Oh,
stop
yeah.
and go back the other way because someone was in a clown. Who
Well, it
wears a
wasn't,
clown
and it wasn't
costume?
just see. The thing is, I've never seen you freak out about a normal clown. I've only ever seen you freak out about the creepy clowns, the ones that have been.
Are there anything other than creepy clowns?
I don't
You're
think
not
Bozo was
afraid
intentionally
of
creepy.
Ronald McDonald.
Yeah, he brings me hamburgers and French fries.
So
What
that's
about
I'm saying.
Bozo?
Yeah,
Bozo, I'm fine with. And maybe it's because I was exposed to Bozo before my brother exposed me to it. I'm almost positive that's what happened.
So, like I said, like Phil, your brother has a mask.
Oh yeah.
Matt has been over there, and that mask freaks him out. And it is.
I
a
had
s-
forgotten about that mask. Thanks. Now I don't want to go to John's anymore. I'd
But it-
forgotten all about that mask.
But it is a creepy. Like he's got a giant gaping maw with sharp teeth, and he's dirty and all
So
kinds
the
of creepy.
bar opens in half an hour. You'll be able to
Yeah,
drink some.
no kidding.
So on it, circling back to a point that we talked about earlier, I certainly thought that I really enjoyed it being a Stephen King fan and that, and I thought that Tim Curry did a fabulous
Oh, his
job
performance is amazing.
as Pennywise. But we talked about how you build and you build that atmosphere and you build it towards the eventual climax. And I certainly thought in that movie, when you get to the end, and that movie's certainly old enough, I don't have any problem spoiling it, that the visual presentation of the spider, which isn't exactly what it is in the book, was kind of a letdown because it certainly wasn't.
They tried to go
What
CG
they-
before CG was,
Yeah.
I mean, anything before Jurassic Park that tried to use CG just failed miserably.
I mean,
in my
it was
opinion, but-
a reasonable effort, but it certainly was kind of like, oh.
Even going back and looking at Jurassic Park, talking about CG, there are some spots in that they're not as great as they could be.
Yeah.
But that was I think you're right. I think that's the good benchmark. That's where it starts.
Yeah, that's the line I draw in the sand.
Yeah. I
movie
think
watching.
that's definitely a fair line.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think we got maybe 20 minutes into the movie at most, and it's
Yeah.
like a 4-hour movie.
Yeah, it is.
because it was like a mini-series deal on TV.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. I couldn't. No, I'm good. And then like Killer Clowns from Outer Space shows up on Netflix
Yeah.
occasionally, and I'm like,
Oh,
flip,
and
flip, flip.
the front of
The
that.
pictures,
Yeah, that
the
is
picture is very much like that mask I was talking
crazy.
about.
Yeah. Oh, now
I don't even like that mask.
I watched that
Just be-
when I was much younger, and about the only thing I really remember is that people being surrounded in cotton candy, and then they stick the straw in and suck the blood out.
Yeah.
Ah,
That didn't bother me.
ah.
I'm just gonna
Like,
pretend that was a normal person doing that, not a clown.
Speaking of Jurassic Park, there's another thing that's a really good thing to pull off in horror. I forget his last name all of a sudden. Wayne Knight played Newman on
yeah.
on the Seinfeld show. Runs into the spitters, and sorry, I'm not.
The Dilophosaurus.
There you go.
Dilophosaurus.
Dilophosaurus. And at first, he's looking at this little 2-foot tall bright green lizard,
So
and he's
cute.
like, "Yeah, hey, buddy." And then they chirp at him, and he's like, "Oh, great, I'm out of here. See ya." And then they launch the frills on their neck and the spitting and then the eating in the car, and that was a pretty scary scene for me.
It's intense for sure.
Yeah.
It definitely is intense.
But you gotta love those horror movies.
Yeah.
I mean, probably playing on the whole clown thing. You think it's an innocent,
Yeah.
no big deal, and then all of a sudden, wow, there it is.
All clowns are evil. Wow, that's got to be a terrible movie for you too. If we get to the end and there's a spider.
Yeah, and that kind of plays
Well-
up on my arachnophobia fears. But right now I'm watching Australia, so we're never ever moving there. They got those.
You can't go 10 feet without something
They're
trying to kill
called
you.
huntsman. They're called huntsman spiders, and it's because they're as big as this freaking table.
We were
Blah.
listening to the top
No.
5 scariest animals from Major Spoilers, and anglerfish is pretty bad, but that huntsman spider. Ugh.
If there's a spider as big as your dog, no.
Yeah, I'm out.
I'm not about that.
Well, they eat birds.
I like birds.
I don't know. I mean,
So we've gone over movies, we've gone over books, we've gone over games.
Cthulhu Saves the World is a great game, but it has nothing to do with horror. Cthulhu's the
The good
hero.
guy.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Cthulhu. Isn't that the one that Jesse played?
Cthulhu is a game, yeah.
Yep.
We know a little
It's
bit
RPG.
about Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
We like that. It's good. I don't know. Shirley, is there anything you go back to for horror? You enjoy horror. I really just don't care for it.
Good
You
night.
watched like all the paranormal activities.
Yeah, I've seen all the paranormal activities. They scare the whatever out of me. I think the horror stories or movies that really, really get me, and I don't know, maybe it was because of my age, were the Freddy Krueger movies. Like, I literally could not go to sleep until the sun rose. And, when you're watching it at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon the previous day, I'm not going to sleep. No.
Well, and that was your...
But in the Freddy Krueger movies, even if you fell asleep during the day, he still came after you. So why could you sleep when it was daylight?
I don't know. My mind was like, sunlight, I'm safe.
Well, that is your... I mean, that is your generation. I was too young for Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
Phil, you're a couple of years older than me.
I watched a lot of Freddy Krueger, but that's not the kind of the ones that really scared me. Like Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, okay.
That was.
I haven't seen that.
And I was too young to see that kind of when it first came out. But when I came back to watch some of the classics, whatever. Rosemary's Baby. The Exorcist was also very good, but I don't know what it was about Rosemary's Baby, but that creeped me the heck out. And that's also a very good example of when I don't think you ever, maybe at the very end you see like the hand of the baby, but other than that, you don't actually see the actual monster that is birthed. But
isn't it all, it's like, I keep thinking the name of the movies are Damien. Is that
The Omen.
That's the Omen.
The Omen.
Those are pretty good.
Like, it is never anything that's physical. You get driven insane. It's all something that's mental. Is that how Rosemary Baby is?
Yeah, so if you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, the basic idea there is that it starts off seemingly being a simple story about a woman, a pregnant woman, kind of in an apartment with her husband and everything, and then she slowly starts thinking that these people might be part of a cult that are kind of around her, and then she starts thinking that it's possible that maybe they're doing something to her child, and it's just kind of very, very much a building of tension as the movie goes along. And then they did some very clever things. One thing that just sticks out in my mind, I don't know why, is that there's some scene in the kitchen. What's going on in the kitchen is important, but she like walks out of the kitchen or whatever, and like right before the shot ends or whatever, like in like the chrome over like the exhaust fan or something, or I don't know exactly what it was because that doesn't seem right for the time period it was set in. But you see like the flash of like a screaming face or like a demon, and it just keeps on going. It doesn't like explain that or whatever. Like no one, only the viewer of the movie sees that, but it still seems like it's like just that building of something's not right here, and that, and it also plays off of kind of the God good, devil bad type thing. It does a lot of that, which also I don't know why, but that keys in a lot for me, even though I'm not a particularly.
I guess one question I have for everybody is what drew you to Cthulhu or that type of storytelling that we're doing now?
Well, go ahead, John.
Sorry, I could have waited.
I played one game at an overnight. A friend of mine passed away some years ago, and every year we would get together at the local comic book store and do an overnight gaming event to raise money for cystic fibrosis, which is what he passed away from. And the first year we played a Call of Cthulhu game, and the system was so simple, and the concepts were so foreign. The horror aspects in that game were literally like, we found a dead guy hanging from a tree, and we had to, there was something clearly in his mouth, but we couldn't see what, so we had to put our fingers in his mouth to pull it out. And the storyteller was so good at involving us and getting us drawn in, that did it for me. I also like scaring people. I loved scaring you and Johnny when I ran the one game, and you saw me raise my hand. You knew I was going to hit the table. At least Johnny knew I was going to. And when I hit the table, it freaked you both out.
Yep.
Like, I like that, drawing people in and getting them committed. You can get committed in an action and adventure kind of story, but it's not the same. It's never the same. When you're involved in horror, it affects you more psychologically than it does a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. I blame R.L. Stein.
Oh, those were really good.
I started with Goosebumps, and actually, he's sort of come back into my life recently. Not that he ever really left. I follow him on Twitter, and I love when he does 5 minute he tweets horror stories. So in 5 tweets or less, he tells a complete story, and it scares the pants off you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but My 6-year-old daughter recently started watching the Goosebumps television show on Netflix.
And now she can't sleep.
I tell you what, there are some episodes where I'm like, how are you still calm right now? But,
and now Johnny can't sleep.
Yeah, because I'm scared, and all I did was watch you watch the show. But she really likes them. Like there's ones that she has to turn off because she like gets to the middle and she's like, yeah, it's too much for me, and turns it off. And we can't even let her actually watch Scooby-Doo cartoons before bed because those do cause nightmares. But she will watch in the middle of the day with the lights on and everything, watch a Goosebumps episode, and be fine. She likes it. She likes being scared for a little bit, and then she watches something nice and cute, and then she goes to bed. It's all good. She's actually she's watched the most of the Goosebumps shows and has moved on to Fear Street, which is probably just a little bit too old for her because it's a little outside the realm of kids stuff in those movies. But she loves the whenever a protagonist learns a lesson from the horror that they witness, that she loves that show.
You know,
So-
as much as I don't like, you said R.L. Stein and the Goosebump books. As much as I don't like horror, I loved those books.
Right?
And I loved the scary story books because there were 3 volumes. Those things scared the pants off me. Like,
Right.
I would not go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Kind of scared the pants off me. But I really wish I still had those, and I'm sure I'm going to go home and look on Amazon and see if they have them there.
Yeah, and I forget when it happened exactly, but my dad really freaked me out because there was a show that my brothers were watching on Nick Jr., which was all kids programming. And I was reading probably my 20th or 30th Goosebumps book. And I think I'd maybe even branched into some of his teen line. There's I want to say he was the author of the last Vampire line of books, which were pretty good, except never the last Vampire, so it's complicated. But anyway, so I'm sitting there reading one of these books one day, and the show turns off, and Dad goes, "Hey, look," and he points at the screen, and there's R.L. Stein's name at the end of this kids show as writer of Eureka's Castle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, what is wrong with this guy's head that he can write Goosebumps and scary stuff and then write Eureka's Castle about puppets? Like, that's so weird.
Yeah, now that we're talking about this, I forgot I also liked Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, yeah.
Which had some really scary episodes and then not so much scary.
Oh, yeah. There's an episode with Melissa Joan Hart when she was just off of Clarissa Explains It All, and she did that as sort of like a branching out. And she's a babysitter, and there's a ghost out in the woods behind this house. And
I do remember that one. That
he
was
keeps saying,
freaky.
"I am so cold," and real creepy. And then there was that Doctor Who episode where the little boy in the gas mask comes up and goes, "Are you my mother?" And I was like, "Oh God!" I just
Yeah.
had a flashback to that.
So, Phil, what draws you in, as Shirley was saying? Or what drew you in as a younger gentleman?
To horror, or to specifically to Call of Cthulhu?
Yeah, where was the beginning of your Call of Cthulhu experience?
I called up Phil and I said, "Hey, Phil, I want to come play this game."
That is honestly to God the truth.
Really?
And so, I had always peripherally heard, about Cthulhu, and I didn't know anything really about it, and I still don't know a tremendous amount about it. Like
That's good.
I haven't read a lot of Lovecraft. I've read certainly some of the modules that we run, and I've participated in the stories and stuff. I've listened to some of the Masks podcast, and so, but I've always loved to play games, and I'd certainly done a fair amount of RPG stuff, and so, and a lot of my prior experience to that had been Dungeons and Dragons. So I would argue much more mechanically driven, depending on the DM, and a lot of my DMs ended up being a lot more mechanically driven for Dungeons and Dragons. But I had always tried to, when I played those, try to go very much more character and story, because while yes, I wanted to roll the dice and fight the things and get the new powers and all that stuff, I still wanted to have a story that was leading us along and role play my character. And so this idea of this very much more story-driven mechanic, with still some mechanics for resolution of, opposing wants or, some randomness or whatever, But that idea of, okay, I can really just focus on being this character and saying what this character would say and describing the actions that my character would take was really kind of what drew me in, and I really enjoyed about specifically this system. And then I just had a long-standing enjoyment of horror in general. I've been reading King since at least high school, so while I ended a lot of Lovecraft, certainly a nice overlap.
Have you picked up any of his stories yet?
Who's
Lovecraft?
Oh,
Stephen King. No, Lovecraft.
I think maybe it's one of those things that I've put on my Kindle and just not gotten around.
Yeah, because they're all like free
to reading.
Yeah.
Just at this point in my life, there's a lot of different priorities going on, and so you got to focus here and there. And
the good news is most of his stuff is short. I mean, you're in and out and done. It's a little anachronistic at times. Like the language is older.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that on purpose, but definitely. I like it to a point, and I like a lot of the themed stuff around that that August Derleth wrote, and people have written a lot since then.
Yeah.
Stephen King, even you could call him a Cthulhu or a Lovecraftian author. He'll tell you that he was influenced quite a bit. So, like Needful Things is a big one.
Yeah.
That
Fog,
was
or the
The
mist.
Mist, yeah, was
Mist.
another one. So
I can certainly see how with in some of the King novels, there's kind of this connecting story, kind of with Crimson King and that kind of thing. I can almost see how that might connect to be a parallel.
Well,
not exactly the same.
And if we've learned anything from King, his Maine is much like Lovecraft's Massachusetts. You don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Agreed.
I don't want to cut it short, but that does kind of cut our time. So you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. So Phil, you're at PR Durham.
Yes.
John, you're at Fool's Mask. Shirley, you're at SNed70.
Yes.
I'm at Quiet. You can find the podcast at Nerds Domain.
On Twitter.
On Twitter, all that. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/nerdsdomain. You can go over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. That would be awesome.
Please.
Then write all kinds of terrible, nasty comments after the 5 stars.
Yes.
So we've decided that's acceptable. You can go over to the website and sign up for the newsletter on the right-hand side. Keeps you up to date on where we're at and what we're doing and where we're going. And then you can... oh, no, I got one. Hold on, I got it. You can go over to patreon.com and support us there at patreon.com/nerdsdomain. And then you can buy our shirts /Luke. We will talk to you guys real soon.